What's up everyone, my name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I'm going to show you how to make this drum loop, but keep in mind that this drum loop is using no samples at all. This is only Serum with minimal post-processing. Alright, so I have all these drums separated out into their individual stems. You know, I have a kick, I have a snare, I have actually a hi-hat loop. I have kind of an open hi-hat, it's very similar to the original hi-hats. I have a ride cymbal and kind of a crash cymbal. And it all comes together to make that loop that you heard just a second ago, but I'm going to take you through individually what I did for each one. So the first one obviously would be this kick. I just want to say for the post-processing, all I have is this wave shaper, and I'm just cranking it up because the sound coming out of Serum wasn't actually that loud. I needed it, just more sound coming out there. I need to make it more powerful. So I usually do that with a wave shaper, but just adding a little dot and dragging it around up top until I hear it distorting, and then I back it off just a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at what we have here. Right now, I am going to be using more oscillators in this, but right now I just have oscillator A on, which is this analog BD sine, and it sounds like this. This is just the low of the kick drum, and right now this could actually work as like some kind of trap hip hop kick or something like that. But what I'm doing here, I'm using envelope 2, and I'm doing I just have a really tight shape right here, and I'm using that to control the volume. So it's going up and back pretty quick. And then LFO1 right here is actually controlling the wavetable position because there's more harmonics over on this side of the wavetable than down here. So I want to just bring out those harmonics at the transient of the kick. So that's what I'm doing with this LFO, with this shape. LFO2 right here is doing something a little bit different. This is on the bipolar mode, so it's going either way, and it's working with the coarse pitch. So it's falling down in pitch, and then at the very end, it's kind of dropping down a little bit more. I didn't want the low end to kind of hang around exactly one note the entire time. That's what gives it kind of a muffled effect. Down at the bottom, it isn't just a pure sine wave. Once it reaches the end, it still kind of falls down and adds more character, so I liked that. Next up, I have this oscillator right here, which is just doing this. But it's FMing from A, so when I turn A on, it becomes more white noisy. And basically what's going on here is both of these are down -3, but I have this really crazy end of the table of thick and thin. It sounds really, really heavy back here. And I'm only bringing up the volume for a second. You can see with LFO3, it's going on the level all the way. It's just for a second. Also, I added it on the coarse pitch right here a little bit as well, just to give it a little more snap and make it more atonal. So altogether, it starts to sound a lot more like a kick drum. Then after that, I added this noise oscillator right here, which is Attack Kick 57. There's a ton of these in here, which are really good for making kicks, especially when you turn on the one-shot mode right here, because they're all kind of kick drum attacks, kicks, clicks, stuff like that. And it's really good to throw at the front of your kick drum. It just sounds like this. Just a really, really short attack. And I like it just as a subtle layer to the kick. It goes from this to this right here. It's hard to notice, but it does make a difference. Now this kick sounds too light and airy. It's not heavy and like punchy enough, so I'm going to fix that actually with a filter, because I have this band EQ12 going on right here, and I'm just going to add a big peak right at around about 3K. So I'm just going to bring the decibels up and bring some drive up a little bit as well, and I'm also modulating the drive with LFO2. Not for any particular reason, just because I think it sounded, kind of good adding that extra punch and drive. Now, right now it is distorting a lot. It's distorting a lot in Serum because the master is so high. But that's closer to what it sounds like. So now we have to kind of rein it in a little bit. I have a phaser going on here, which again is not going to lower the level that much. But basically what I wanted to do was just bring the rate, the depth, and the frequency all the way down, turn the feedback down a bit, and just mix it in because it adds a nice texture. It's a nice organic texture. I've compared it to a guitar amp texture before, so have other people, but it just sounds kind of nice mixed in with the kick. After that, I'm going to throw in the compressor, which is going to rein it in a little bit. Maybe not that much, but you can tell it's a lot punchier now. After that, we're going to go into an EQ, which overall is just lowering everything down a lot. Now I can turn it up all the way and you only get a little bit of distortion, but I just bringing down the lows and the highs right now. It's really, originally I was just going to bring down the highs and then I ended up bringing down the lows a little bit more. It's just a level at this point. And then at the end, I threw on a hard clip distortion. And that kind of reined it in even more, so we're no longer really clipping a lot in this part. And if we're clipping a little bit, it doesn't really matter because it's going right into this wave shaper right here, which is bringing it up and making it hard clip even further. So that's how I really get punch out of things, just like hard clipping them like this. It works out really well. Now that wasn't terribly complicated. It was kind of complicated, but the process was pretty simple as far as, you know, making the lows, the highs, and just making it strong. With the snare, you have a little more things going on here. And it is not the best snare in the world. It is hard to come up with a really, really good snare just out of Serum and without that much post-processing. People can do it, but it's very difficult. So again, for the post-processing here, we have just a wave shaper, and I brought the dot up, but I also added a little more saturation right here, just a little more distortion to make it sound a little fuller. So I can turn that off. First thing I'm going to do here is just address oscillator A. That's all that it is. It's just a little zap and a tonal bit at the end. And you can kind of see what we're doing here. We have LFO3, which is just a really, really tight curve. I have that controlling the pitch, the coarse pitch, like all the way up, and a little bit of the level here as well. This is down an octave, but basically I just added a few more harmonics to a sine wave. I wanted to add just a little bit of harmonics, so it's kind of close to a triangle wave. Like if you took a triangle wave and started to filter it down, this would probably be what it would be. There's just a few extra harmonics above that sine wave to add a little bit of tonality. So that's all taken care of. That's really all we needed for this one bit. And now we go into something that's a little more complicated. It is the high end part of the snare. I have some noise here, the J106 on the analog tab, and it's doing this. It's already starting to sound a little bit like a snare. I have the level here being controlled by this really, really tight LFO, and I'm also controlling the level with LFO2. So we have two things controlling the level. We have the main one that's just going up and sliding down, and then we have a really fast click of the level. So it goes up really high and then immediately drops down to like a normal level. So we get just that little snap at the beginning. Also, I forgot to mention that oscillator A has this modulation right here for its level. And this is the low end of the snare. It goes up and stays strong for a while and then just fades out. And this LFO right here is actually controlling the pitch right here. I have this on key tracking so I can kind of play the snare on whatever part of the keyboard I wish. But it's controlling the pitch right here. And I'm going to do more with this later, especially when it comes to the filter. This is going to kind of shape almost just the timbre of the sound when you do, like when you like hear a snare. It's not just going to be a, you know what I'm saying? Like it's going to have like a push. It's just got a push, that sort of whoosh to it, which is achieved by this pitch, by modulating this pitch knob right here and by this filter. You can hear if I turn up the resonance, it's got a kind of sound. And you can adjust this with the cutoff. Like, let me keep this up here. You can adjust it however you like your snare. I suppose I'll keep mine about there. It doesn't sound bad. And I'm going to be modulating both the cutoff and the resonance with LFO4 right here. I'm going to turn the fat all the way up, make sure it's on a high 12. This is just a general high pass filter, nothing crazy. I have this switched from mix to level right here so I can kind of control the loudness of it all. And I have some drive automation going on, yeah, right here with LFO2 again. So that is all good, and we can hop right into the effects section of Serum. First up, I have distortion, hard clip distortion. There we are. We're making it punchy, we're making it strong right off the bat. It just fattens it up a little bit before going into the other effects. We have hyper dimension, where I'm not using the hyper, but I'm using a little bit of the dimension. What am I modulating this with? Yeah, right here, LFO4. I'm just sliding in a bit of the dimension expanding as the snare fades out. So there's no dimension expanding right at the attack, right at the front of the snare. And then as the snare goes up, it achieves a little more stereo width. It's hard to hear, but it would be audible, especially if you were to, you know, mix it in and master the track with it. You'd hear some stereo in the snare. So after this, just an EQ, and you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just giving it a lot more lows. LFO4 here is controlling this peak filter. You can see what it's doing with the frequency. And it's just sliding up, kind of adding more to that kind of vowel. And then we have a low pass filter right here, which is getting modulated with LFO2. Just the Q factor. So the Q factor, I set it right at where the fundamental is hitting, right at that one note. So it pops up a little bit and then slides back down. So it doesn't sustain that boost forever. That's just kind of at the start of the snare. And that gives it a little more power. Next up, I have some multiband compression. Now you can really hear the snap at the beginning. That works out really well. I also have this really quick LFO right here, just this really tight one, going down on the threshold, so it spikes up really loud for just a minute there. Yeah, and it clips, but that comes in handy because it just adds a little more punch right before the hard clip, because when we have the hard clip after everything, nothing's going to actually clip. All the clipping is controlled by us. It's not going to clip in the mixer. It's all good. So I like doing that just to add some more snap. And then I have the phaser doing the same thing that I did for the kick. It adds a nice tone. I enjoy it. And then after that, I have a filter, which is actually a low pass. And this isn't that important. All I'm really doing with this is adding just a little bit of extra high ring. And I know it's hard to believe with the low pass, but I have the cutoff all the way up and I have a little bit of resonance. If I were to turn the mix all the way up, you hear that ringing at the very top? That's what I'm adding. So I'm essentially just mixing it in from none to a little bit. Just for a little extra high end. It's hardly noticeable. And then after that, it goes right into the wave shaper, which cranks it up. Some people might say it's too much distortion. They might be right. You could back it off a little bit. Maybe get rid of this. But I kind of like that doofy sounding snare with a little bit of distortion at the bottom, and I think it mixes pretty well with the kick. Alright, so those are actually the complicated parts out of the way. All the other stuff is just like hi-hats and cymbals. So I'm going to show you how I made this little hi-hat loop. All these hi-hat hits sort of sound a little bit different, and it works out pretty well for making kind of a hi-hat loop instead of just the same one going like it's kind of a mixture, and it sounds more alive. So I have two LFOs going here. I have one for just the level on the noise, which is I just kept it at the acoustic hum 1, and it's doing this, which you would expect. This is your typical hi-hat pattern, just it just goes on forever on a loop. So that's pretty easy, and I just have the noise oscillator on and the filter. For LFO2, I kind of made it this shape. It's going on the same speed as LFO1, but I made it this shape, just a few random steps, and I added it on just a little bit of the pitch. And that causes, the hi-hats, the white noise's pitch to slide around a little bit, which gives you the sense of, different hi-hats, like things are happening that are like a little bit different each time. And I also kind of worked with that a little bit on this filter where I added it to the cutoff. Overall, it's a high-pass filter to get rid of all the lows that I didn't want, but it's also doing a little bit of that variation. And in the effects section, I'm also adding some variation with this LFO because I have it modulating the mix. So some have more stereo width than others, and it's subtle. It's hard to notice. But there are some hits that have a little more stereo width, and that just adds to the sort of randomness, to make it feel live. Then I have some multiband compression, and you can see what I'm doing here with the EQ. I'm just making it sound less white noisy. Like that doesn't sound natural. I need to bring down the very, very high end and roll off the low end. And it works out a lot better. And in the effects section, all I have going is a Maximus. Just compressing little tiny peaks here and there. So that mixes with the kick and the snare pretty well. Keep in mind that there's also a little bit of side chaining going on, but that's nothing complicated. Then I have this open hi-hat, which is, I cloned this hi-hat loop preset, and I just edited it a little bit. I edited LFO1 to look like this. So instead of just immediately cutting out, it kind of, it holds a little bit longer and it's more open. It's more of an open hi-hat. And that's pretty much it. That's all I really did. Everything else stayed exactly the same, and it kind of adds an open hi-hat on top of the other close hi-hats. All right, next I have this little ride cymbal, which is very, very easy to make. It's very easy to make these sort of natural sounding cymbals with Serum, because all you have to do is take a noise. You can take really just any kind of noise that's very white noisy, as long as it's not like a weird one like Waterworld or anything. This one I have a cymbal loop. This is, you know, it already sounds very much like a cymbal. So if you just listen to the raw, it pretty much is a cymbal, because it's a recorded cymbal. And then I added this this little slope on there, and then I used the Combs filter. Let me turn it up a little bit with the EQ. I added this Combs filter, and this adds a lot of natural sounding, like it's just a natural sounding EQ shape. It makes it sound not so harsh and digital and like perfect. It makes it sound organic. So I found a nice spot for the cutoff, and I turned the resonance up, and you can control how much the sound decays and how much reverb it has with this resonance. So if you put it at about there, it has a natural sounding fade. And then of course, to make it sound even more natural, I put an EQ on it that boosts, you know, some natural cymbal frequencies. I took care of the very high end this way, and I rolled off the lows as well. That's all it takes to do something like this. It's not hard at all. I also pitched it up a little bit, but that just depends on the noise that you're using. And then finally, I have this cymbal, which is using a very similar technique. It's just kind of a splash cymbal. And this is using the same stuff. I used bright white noise this time instead of the actual cymbal recording. I just decided to use bright white. I found a nice spot for the Combs filter and turned the resonance way up. Without the Combs filter, just sounds like a random noise splash, just really basic and simple. But it kind of comes to life with this, and it's splashing out like that. Works out really well. And I used the same EQ shape just to keep it sounding natural and to make it kind of sound like the ride. So it all blends together with sidechaining to this. So synthesizing drums in Serum, tricky, but not impossible. It can be done, and it can be done elegantly. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can leave a like. If you didn't enjoy it, you can tell us what you want to see in the comments below. Did you not want this tutorial? Maybe you wanted something completely different. Maybe you want tutorials for a completely different thing. Well, you can let us know, and we can take it into account, and who knows, maybe we'll come out with a tutorial for what you want. So thank you guys so much for all the support, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.